I'd like to welcome everybody to our third in a series of COVID-related webinars to help communities think through their strategies and solutions to respond to the urgent needs arising as part of the COVID crisis here across the country. Our cities have been really at the forefront of building smart city strategies, and we're at a time where technology is really the only thing that can scale and meet the needs that we have for distance education and distance telework and telemedicine. So we're very happy to bring these informational webinars to the forefront. My name is Scott Turnbull. I'm with US Ignite. We're a nonprofit that's dedicated to building and growing the smart city movement across the country. I'm joined by my colleagues, Lee Davenport, who's the Director of Community Development, and Mari Silby, who's the Director of Communications for US Ignite. We have a great panel of guests to talk today. They're going to talk about their solutions related to bridging broadband gaps during COVID-19 crisis within their communities. As you know, technology has really been filling the gap for telehealth work and telehealth. Getting more and more people online has never been more urgent than it has right now. And we're all getting a lesson in the importance of digital equity across our communities. And these communities have really stepped up to bring more people online, to help make sure they can get a hold of government services, to get to their jobs, to get to their schools. And it's really making a difference. And they have three different approaches we think will be very useful for you in your communities if you choose to adopt them. So I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today to talk about their solutions. We're joined by Clayton Banks. He's the CEO of Silicon Harlem in New York City. Welcome, Clayton. We're joined by Ryan Brown, Chief Communications Officer for the South Carolina Department of Education. And we're joined by Kenneth Bowens, the Director of CTE and STEAM and Innovation at Louisa County Public Schools here in Virginia. So welcome to all of our panelists. It's great to have you here today. What we're going to do is we're going to record this meeting, so just please be aware of that this is recorded. We'll be posting this on our website at us-ignite.org probably tomorrow. That'll include links to resources and examples that our panelists are going to discuss today, so you can get a hold of the recording and you can do some investigation in the additional resources that you'll hear about today as well. So again, that'll get posted tomorrow. We'd love to start with our first panelist, the CEO of Silicon Harlem, as I said. And oh, sorry, before I click that over, we will take questions as well as part of this. An important part of this is the discussion fostered by the people joining the webinar. That's you. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. Please click that. That will bring up an interface. You'll be able to ask that question there. Ask it at any time during this webinar. It will go to my colleague, Mari, who will curate them and help facilitate asking those questions after we wrap up an initial discussion with some of our panelists. But we would love to take those questions, the things that you think are interesting, and any questions you have for our panelists, please use that feature. So again, talking with Clayton in Silicon Harlem, the Silicon Harlem story is amazing. I really love everything coming out of Harlem. The revitalization there has really been, I think, the exemplar for how you can achieve great success in a community when you tap local talent and give those people agency over their own community and give them a voice. It's really been wonderful. So Clayton, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about a mesh network solution that you've put in or help work with partners to put in the Harlem area to get more people online. So welcome, Clayton.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And thank God for US Ignite. It's sort of a way for all of us to connect and really have some strength that we pull from each other. What we have found, if you haven't been reading the news, which sometimes you do need to turn it off, Harlem is at the epicenter of death. We have had more deaths in Harlem than most any other city. And a lot of that is due to, of course, social context and equity. So for us, we've been talking about connectivity for everybody for a long time, and now we have this great opportunity to actually fulfill that dream. So one way we're approaching it, if you will, is we have decided that since New York City is so dense with its fiber infrastructure, they've had it for many years, maybe ahead of most big cities, to the point where we were able to deploy very quickly prior to the pandemic. A few years ago, we were able to deploy an outdoor network with fiber all over the city. When I realized that, I said, boy, what if we were able to leverage that same methodology to go inside the homes and the apartments of Upper Manhattan? So I went to the variety of fiber owners and the city who owns most of the fiber, all the folks that are dealing with the conduit and all the other things that you need. And I was able to strike some deals specifically now as a result of the pandemic, where people were like, okay, what do you need done? What can I do? How can I help? So I struck on that and I was able to do deals where I'm able to get fiber, access to fiber like these kiosks have, and pull that fiber onto the premise. In my case, I wanted to focus on public housing and pull that fiber into the public housing campus, if you will, to figure out how I can utilize that fiber on the campus and then create the wireless mesh from that. If you really think about it, it's almost a wireless network in and of itself, since we're going all the way back to the street. And a lot of times we will find a pole on the street that has the fiber coming into it from one of the providers. I can then beam from that street pole onto a pole at the public housing. Public housing has light poles on their campus. I'm able to put a radio on that particular pole on the campus. In our case, we're using CBRS radios, and those radios then are able to hit the building. So we put the receivers on the buildings, if you will. We're working with both with a variety of OEMs for the equipment. Once we are able to connect to the outdoor and indoor of the wall, we're able to then literally beam the Wi-Fi in every single unit within that particular building. So we're spreading that out across these buildings. And again, what's helpful to us, obviously you got to consider your power, right? Where is the electricity coming from? So what we did is we're working with the housing development. A lot of it's on switched electricity versus banked electricity. So we have to make some adjustments when we run into that issue. But if it's banked and with an automatic, it's like an hour to do the whole thing. So, I mean, when we have that kind of stuff.
Great.
When you have run into the electrical part, it takes a little bit more time. But other than that, it's creating a mesh network, a wireless mesh network that's robust. It's got the kind of consistent speed when you're using CBRS, and we can provide it for free. And so that's what's basically not only bridging this current pandemic, but it's a solution, I think, long-term for just about all of us on this call.
Yeah, that has great potential, CBRS. I mean, there's some complexity around the unregulated spectrum, obviously, but let me ask, so that this was existing light poles that had the connectivity on them already. The ad was the receivers on the buildings. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, we had to add the CBRS radios on the pole at the facility, right, okay, on campus of NYCHA, New York Housing Authority. And then, to your point, do the attachments on the wall. So,
and how did you source those? What was the budget line, or how did that get paid for, or who was responsible for that?
Well, again, this has been a reaction. It's a rapid sort of response to the COVID-19. So what we've couched it as with the city is, let's do a pilot. And as a result of that, we didn't have to incur the additional costs, franchise fees, all types of things. And all of our partners already are certified by the city, including ourselves. So we had the trust of the city to do this, and they had no real solution. So as a result, we were able to, there's some money that gets spent, but that was our own investment.
Sure. Now
we're looking at major investment folks that want to actually scale this much larger. So. Right. For those who are on the call and are asking about, how do I pay for this rollout that I'm thinking about, the money is there. This is the one moment in time where money is everywhere looking for people that are doing infrastructure. So this is the best time ever. US Ignite is loading us up with all these different leads towards money, and this is the best time to make that pitch.
Yeah, and you tell me, what's your big tool for asking for that money? Give us some advice on how do we get a hold of it?
One of the things that I'm finding more and more is people do love data. So they want to be more like, it's more than me just like complaining. It's like, let me show you some statistics. So one of the things we did is not only a variety of surveys over the last 4 or 5 years, where we made the case that 40% of the households in Upper Manhattan do not have broadband in the home. And that sounds crazy if you just say it. People are like, oh, come on, Clayton, everybody's got broadband. The answer is no. 40% don't have broadband. And so when the pandemic hits and everyone has to go home, including our kids that have to go home, right? You're happy when they go to school. You get rid of them for a minute. So they're all got to be home. And now they're saying, hey, mom, dad, I got to get my homework done, or I at least want to read a book, or I want to study something. And it got back to the mayor and the governor and everybody else that said, wait a minute, these people don't have that infrastructure. So yeah, I think the point is that we actually use data to show how important it was, that it creates not only an educational divide, but a health divide, a wealth divide.
Sure.
It's just all these things are impacted now by the result of a digital world.
That's great. And what is your strategy for outreach to the community? That's always going to be a constant message here. And all of us, you're serving these people, you got to let them know it's happening. What did you do for community buy-in? How do you communicate to your end users?
Well, that's a great question. And I always call it the community ecosystem. The community ecosystem for me is made up of 5 components. And when you get those 5 components around you and you sit in the middle, you can almost do anything in a community. So for us, we connected with the academics, right? In Harlem, just as an example, and not every city may have this neighborhood, but in our neighborhood, we got 14 colleges. 2 of them, basically Ivy Leagues. I mean, you got a pipeline right there. So you have to have the academics for research. Second, we always are communicating with our electives because we influence policy. We do all these type of things. Third are the stakeholders in our community, the YMCAs, the churches, and those institutions that are touching people every single day. And fourth, for us, we think the private sector has a role to play. So we are always working with the private sector. And finally, it's the individual. So what we do, for example, in education, I just wrote up a piece for a variety of our, potential private sponsors to say, hey, here are all the principals in District 5 that we are connecting with. And here's what they're saying. This principal has a school of 1,000 kids, and they're telling us that 50% of them do not have a device. They do not have connection at home. Let's address this issue. So when you humanize this technology, right, Scott, if you humanize this, you get your message across. And that's how we get to the people, because the principals will say, this family needs this. They will then give us that family's name. We go out and we deal with that. And the same with NYCHA, it's viral.
That's great. That's great. And are there any published resources online for how you've done this that people could use to establish their own mesh network or put up their own CBRS network?
That will be coming. We are just in the throes of it now, but that is something I'm looking forward to share with all of us and see if this becomes something, more of a regular thing versus sort of a rapid response thing. Sure. Because frankly, if we all think about it, broadband is really not that difficult. It's the video that's much more difficult. Yeah. So the broadband expense is really the upfront capital cost. After that, really, it's not really that much more to go.
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
So I will be writing this whole case study up for all of us to hopefully benefit from.
That's great. And we at US Ignite will post links to that when they go up. So please keep us informed. We'll do community outreach as well to make sure everybody's reaping the benefit of that great work that you're doing up there. Thank you very much, Clayton. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to turn now to Ryan Brown. He's the Chief Communications Officer for the South Carolina Department of Education. Ryan, thank you very much for joining us today. Now, your statewide effort, if I understand it right, you're taking Wi-Fi that's already embedded on buses and moving that around communities to establish hotspots within communities that they can connect for classwork and different things like that. And it's somewhat mobile and somewhat ephemeral, but tell us a little bit about that program, please, if you could.
Sure. Well, first I want to thank you for inviting me to be a part of today's presentation. Just for a little bit of background for those that may not know a whole lot about our state, South Carolina has some very rural areas that are, of course, hard to reach. Our broadband connectivity has grown significantly over the past decade, but we still, many of our areas are hard to reach, and those providers have not quite gotten there yet. Some recent data that we collected from our school districts indicates that about 106,000 of South Carolina households with K through 12 children in them do not have broadband connectivity. And just to put that in perspective, we've got about 800,000 students across our state in the public K through 12 education system. So when we announced statewide school closures on March 16th, we had already kind of thought in the back of our heads, this is going to be an issue for our state as we try to keep students connected and deliver instruction remotely. Some of our school districts are able to, they have one-to-one devices. They can deliver that through broadband connectivity. Some of those devices went home to students and were preloaded with information. And then some school districts, many in fact, are doing sending home paper packets every week or every couple weeks. So we, on the state level, South Carolina is a bit unique in that we own and operate the entirety of our state school bus fleet, about 6,000 buses. And all of those buses that we've purchased since 2015 have had the hardware equipped to have Wi-Fi service. That was really intended for them to be able to turn that service on when they're riding down the road to and from school. But we thought, how can we turn this service on and perhaps put up these 3,000 buses that we have available in some of our more rural areas. So we got to work quickly after that closure was announced, and working with various service providers in South Carolina, had about 300 buses up and running within a week, and have since added a few hundred more to that. And how we've gone about doing that is having our school districts submit to us requests for those buses. We know that the school districts know their local communities best, and we are fulfilling those requests based on their level of poverty, and we also know where those pockets of broadband connectivity do not exist. So that's how that's been our approach. That's a kind of a stopgap solution. It's not sustainable over a long term, but we want to do everything that we could as our state agency, using the assets available to provide what we could for our students.
That's great. So this is leveraging assets you'd made investments in previously. So these buses already had Wi-Fi. That was part of sort of community coverage already. What kind of state approval? I know this is a government partnership. So what sort of state approval was needed to allow the buses to be deployed in this fashion, or was it more ad hoc than that?
Yeah, well, like I said, we do own and operate all of these school buses. So in terms of approval, not a whole lot was needed there, other than any times in states of emergency, when those are declared, any state asset can be used, for to benefit the public. So we've used school buses, to evacuate people from hurricanes. We've used them really for a variety of natural disaster purposes. So this wasn't something, this was a little bit different approach, but we're accustomed to utilizing what's available to us in times of need. So all it really took was us calling some of the internet service providers and working on some pricing negotiation and getting that service. They had the hardware, they just really need to pay the monthly fee or the annual fee to get that service connected to those buses.
Right.
So in terms of procurement and really getting it up and running, there weren't any major hurdles for us.
Okay, and you said you knew where the existing patches and or gaps in coverage were in the community. Was that a community wireless signal survey done before? What resources were you leveraging to know that data-wise?
Sure. We have a K through 12 technology committee that brings together about 10 different state agencies and private entities, including our service providers. And a couple of years ago, I believe it was 2017, we actually mapped out a study using a variety of inputs to determine where those pockets existed. So we have a nice pretty map that we can kind of dial down, on the almost granular level to see where, what zip codes, what streets,
Right.
that service has not reached out to.
And I heard you say you're determining distribution based on sort of needs and requests, and there's sort of an analytics of the poverty in the area. So, can you talk a little bit about, so how are you running that forward-facing interface? How are you getting feedback and requests? Is it through your 311 system? Is it some ad hoc system you've thrown up, and how is that being managed?
Sure. So yeah, we're utilizing, we're looking at each district's poverty index. That's a calculation we use on the state level that takes into account, those families and students eligible for Medicaid, on SNAP, on all basically the federal assistance programs and some of our state ones as well. And we are taking those requests, and those requests are coming in through a pre-existing reporting system that we had in our agency. And that's how we're prioritizing them. So, it's pretty easy. They tell us how many buses they need, and we have 42 bus shops located across our state. We've got about 46 counties in South Carolina, so we've got almost one in every area of the state. So as soon as that service is turned on, those buses can really go to that school district, and then their personnel can determine where they're located, where they're placed strategically. We're seeing, many at churches, many at, YMCAs, town halls, low-income housing neighborhoods, pretty much everywhere under the sun. And the school districts are really knowing their community, and they know where those pockets of needs exist, are really manning those and determining, how long and when they're stationed. What we are in turn providing them is some of the data on usage that we're seeing from that's being provided to us from the service provider. So we can show them, hey, you've got bus number 6758 is in this neighborhood. It doesn't seem like anyone's really using it. You may want to take a look at this and move it somewhere else based on need. Or you may have a communication problem where there's need, but you're not communicating that availability to the local community.
Okay, and to that topic, are these buses manned, first of all, and how are you doing outreach, and how are you communicating to the people you're trying to serve with these buses? How do they know it's there? How do they know how to connect? How do you manage that?
Sure. Some of them are manned, some of them are not. Some school districts have chosen to use those buses. We're also using about 2,000 school buses to deliver meals to students across our state. So we've served a little over 7 million meals during what is going now 6 weeks of school closures. And so some of those buses equipped with Wi-Fi are being used to deliver meals. As they stop at those locations to drop off those meals, they're hanging around for a little bit so students can download and upload their schoolwork. Some are left alone. They're just locked, and no one's actually getting on the bus. It's kind of, I think it's about 100, maybe a little bit less than 100 feet of signal availability, with strength depending on exactly how far away you're standing on it. Kind of like a small parking lot. So yes, some are being manned, some are not. And then in terms of what was it? Remind me the second part of that question.
How are you communicating to the users? How do they know how to connect?
Sure.
How do they know where it is?
So we're mainly relying on the school districts to communicate the individual locations. What we have done on the state level is we have an established COVID-19 website, and we have a map of all the locations that the school districts have reported to us, and we update that daily with new locations. And we've also added, libraries that have Wi-Fi within their parking lots. Pretty much any data that comes to us showing where Wi-Fi may be available in a public area. But we're mainly relying on the school districts to communicate on the local level. We've utilized some of the governor's press conferences, addressing the state of emergency and various operations for my boss, the state superintendent, to message that availability to parents. And I think just like probably how you all found out what we were doing, it's been pretty widely covered in the media. So we haven't had a major communications issue, because it seems like anything unique these days is getting some play in the media. But in terms of really dialing down and making sure Each individual need is aware. We've really asked our school districts to step up to the plate and do that.
That's great. That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ryan. I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining and sharing your experience today. Again, if you have any resources, we would love to post them. We'll post some news stories as well when we post this video. So anything else that you might have to pass along for districts looking to do something similar, please send on to us and we'll make sure to pass that on to our users as well. So thank you very much, Ryan. All right, next up, I would like to talk to our representative from Louisa County, which is just down the road from me here in Virginia. I'm in Richmond myself, but Kenneth Bowens, thank you very much. He's the director of CTE and STEAM at the Innovation for Louisa County Public Schools. Excuse me there. So thank you very much, Kenneth. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Now, your solution is around a towed trailer that's brought out to different areas around the county to provide wireless connectivity for your users. So it's more dense and a different solution than the bus solution we've heard, and it seemed to be very innovative and community involved. So tell us a little bit about that effort, please.
Sure. So we started meeting about COVID-19 about a week, actually even before that, but before school shut down, and really trying to find ways to stay ahead of it. And connectivity was a big topic. I don't think we saw the school shutdown coming as quick as it did, so it kind of took everybody off guard, but it was something that was definitely on our radar. So the first thing we did was turn all of our school parking lots and things into Wi-Fi zones, which was pretty easy. We started talking about, how are we going to connect with our students, and the bus thing came up. So I'm not sure if it was the school division that was just represented or the state that was seen, but someone had seen the Wi-Fi on buses, and that was a big conversation. So the technology director, David Childress, who has been a big partner, he and I have really led this. We were talking, and our buses unfortunately do not have Wi-Fi on them. I think we're purchasing new ones this year that do, but our fleet does not have that capability. So we started getting into the conversations of, what would we need to buy to add it to buses, and how would that work? And would we have to plug them in, or would they keep operating? Would a driver have to go out and start them every day to recharge the batteries, and so on and so forth? And it just turned into a thing where we didn't really feel comfortable doing that. So we said, we've got to look at some different solutions. And that's where we came up with this wireless on wheels solution idea. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen at this point so you guys can see. So let me present here. All right, so we started, I probably want to start at the beginning, sorry. Just gave away the whole presentation now. So we came up with this idea of wireless on wheels, or what we call WOW. And basically, we have the same problems that a lot of people have, and especially in a rural community. We're very spread out here. We're not a city where people are very close. So there are some areas where broadband is available, a high-speed internet, but for the majority of our community, it's not an option. So we had to figure out a way to connect our students to the internet so that we could share resources with them, communicate, and those type of things. And going into everyone's home just wasn't going to work. So we decided if we could create these kind of hotspots or areas where they could go, that would be the best. So from there, we came up with WOW, which is, again, wireless on wheels. And it's a solar-powered hotspot, basically. It has a internet router in it, and then we connect to a Verizon service provider as you would like a cell phone, and we broadcast that network out. It has about a 200-foot range, and it can do anywhere from 5 to 10 people at a time. So it's not designed for mass gatherings, which we're not supposed to gather more than 10 anyway, so it kind of works out. And it's also not really designed for high-end streaming or downloading Netflix movies or things like that. It's more for that, I've got to go check my email, I've got to log on to Google Classroom and check my assignments, and I've got to connect with my teacher. So we made the first prototype about 2 weeks ago, and we put it out at the local grocery store, and I kind of thought, this is a cool idea, we're really excited about it, but we put it right in the center of town where there actually is pretty good connectivity. So I didn't know how popular it would be, but it was actually very popular. The community response was huge. I think the community was mostly excited that we admitted the issue, that we had, we were doing something, making steps to try to help them. And within the first 2 weeks, we had, around 300 unique users that logged onto it to use it. Every time we go down there, I don't know if you can see the subway in the background, but I go there for lunch quite a bit. Every time I go down there, there is at least 1 or 2 cars sitting there utilizing the service. So it's pretty cool. I'm really excited about the way that
I think we're seeing your first slide still, Kenneth, by the way, if you want to go down to maybe slide 4 or 5 to see the.
Yep, I'll keep going. So yep, so this is what the trailer looks like. So essentially we took 3 solar panels, 300-watt system. We mounted it on. It's all built out of wood. So to me,
I'm sorry, Kenneth. What I was trying to say is that we don't see your slides. We just see the first slide so far. We're not seeing the later slides yet.
All right. What about now?
Yeah, now we see it. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry. Sorry about that, everybody. So I think because I was presenting, so it probably wasn't showing. So we have it in the Food Line parking lot, like I was saying, and so this is some close pictures of it. And it basically, we built the whole thing out of wood. So what I tell people, it's kind of like the garage version of a high-end, something that you might see in the military or deployment. And we're building them all on site. So they're 100% built by myself, David Childress, and several members of our maintenance crew and our technology department are working hand in hand to build these together. We get the trailers from Lowe's. We get all the hardware locally that we can. When I say we can, we do get all the hardware locally. It takes a lot of trips to different stores. And then the solar things we buy online through a company called Windy Nation, and they actually gave us a bulk price, which helped us a lot. So what you're seeing here is the inside of the setup. So batteries, power comes into the solar panel, goes to shut off, charge controller. We have some fuses in there, batteries, and then there's the inverter. And from the inverter, we have power that goes to our modem, which is connected to an external antenna to help give us a little bit better service. And then we have a pretty high-end, just a home wireless router, but a high-end one in there that transmits the signal actually pretty far, farther than I thought it would. So it's gone pretty well. This version doesn't have it in there, but we also actually installed a phone. We just used an old cell phone. It's not even on a wireless system, like a network. We just connected it to the router itself. And we use that for GPS tracking. So the first thing everyone asks is, are you worried about somebody stealing this? So we put an old phone in there and we logged it in with a Google account so we can track it now. So if in order to come up and just, we obviously locked the trailer hitch, but if anybody were to decide to take it, we'd be able to track it. So again, pretty simple design overall, but it's worked really well for us. And we, at the end of this week, have built 13 different units, and then we made 10 in a week. So that's, to me, pretty substantial. It takes about, I would say, a day to make like 1.5. So if you're really cranking, you have a lot of people, you can make 3. Again, if you up the number of people, you can certainly make more. But for us, I'm pretty proud of what we've done. So we're deploying these actually tomorrow. We've got 4 or 5 out now, but we're going to start putting them all over the community. So before we started building, we actually went around the community and tested the cellular service. So these work on cell service. So if you don't have good cell service, you're not going to get good signal. So we looked at areas of our county that don't have internet. And then we went to all those areas and we tested cell signals. So we took a 12-volt battery, we took the modem and the router, and we did speed tests and we charted them all so that we could kind of identify what areas were the best. And that's where we're placing these trailers. And then we're going to send out a map. Our superintendent does a lot of video messages, so he'll be sending out a map with pins in it that identify all the spots, and then also our schools as zones. So we're really excited to get those out to the community. I think they're dying to get them. And then if you wanted to do full build details, they're available on our website that you can see right there. And I'm not going to click on it because I don't think it'll screen share, but if you go to that website, wow.lcps.k12.va.us, you'll be able to find pictures, build plans with dimensions, and a parts list with clickable links that shows everywhere that we ordered everything.
That's great.
For me, that's kind of basically the overall program.
So we'll share that link on the resources page as we are with the other one. So if you check back at us-ignite.org, we will definitely put a link to the resources that you shared. And if someone is joining on phone, what we're looking at are these trailers that have these built wooden boxes and structures around them that are housing about 3 solar roof solar panels, it looks like, with some batteries put inside and some Wi-Fi devices as well. Now, did you tap local shop classes at the high school. Did I understand that right? To build these?
No, so I'm actually the director of CTE, which is Career and Technical Education. So that's the area I oversee. But all of our students and pretty much all of our teachers are off right now just due to safety reasons. We did have one of our teachers just, he called me up and said, "Hey, I saw this in the parking lot. I really want to volunteer. Can I help build it?" So he did come in and build it, but it's mostly been just our staff
Okay.
on creating them. Yep.
That's what I love about this story. So it's a really community source project. So if I heard you right, you and your team are physically driving around to map the signal strength around the area to determine where to put it. You're working with the school to do the communication itself to the end users of where it is, and your shop and the people you're working with are directly responsible for putting it together. Who's providing the network connectivity for it right now? Who is it going through?
So we're just using the Verizon, we bought cell phones from Verizon with data plans and took the SIM cards out and then put them in a modem that we bought.
Okay, great. And do you, I know we've sort of begun a conversation around sort of sustainable use of this coming out of the direct crisis. So I don't know how much you can or you might be willing to share about that, but we talked to some satellite providers. What do you see as the potential for that in Louisa County? Now, for those who are not familiar with the area, Louisa County, they're close enough to Richmond. They're about a half-hour drive from where I live, but they're a fairly rural area. A lot of it's good jobs out there, great people, but they're not dense. It's not a densely populated area.
Yeah, absolutely. So the cell service, like I mentioned before, is not great everywhere. And that's one of the things that the first hurdles we had to get over was people said, well, we need to have one here. We definitely need to have one here. And when you go out and you test the cell signal there and it's, putting one here would really be a waste of a unit. So that's where we talked about satellite, which was actually my idea as a director of CTE, the technology director. So he was jealous that I came up with that. But one of the issues we're having, so if anybody on this call can help us out today, is really connecting with a satellite provider that wants to come on board. So one of the goals of this was not to put any on the business of the place that we're putting them. So we could say, it literally just takes up a parking space. And if you're willing to have it here, we really appreciate it. And you have to be okay with a few people congregating, but we're not asking to plug in. We're not asking to put anything in the ground. Basically, if you call us up tomorrow and say, "Hey, get this out of here, I don't want it," we can come pick it up and move it. So the few satellite providers we've spoken to, I think A, have a hard time understanding what we want to do, and then B, they really want to mount a pole in the ground or have something secure to mount their dish to. So we're still looking for a partner to come on board with that. If anybody knows anybody, we're certainly open to it.
That's great. So we'll put your contact information again and how they could reach out to you if you're looking for a partnership there. I think it's a great opportunity to prove the value of rural broadband. And again, as we begin to rethink this past just the responsive effort that we're in right now, I think there's a lot of great potential. Thank you very much, Kenneth. It's great to join us today. I really appreciate you talking to us.
No problem.
Thank you. So I'd like to turn it over to Q&A from the audience. Mari, I know you've been monitoring the Q&A that's been coming across, and we've had a lot of really great spirited questions that have come across in that time. So I'd like to turn it over to you. Where do you think you want to start?
Great. No, thank you very much, and appreciate all the questions that are coming in. I want to start with one because it applies to sort of all the panelists here from Lash Litwer. Have any of you successfully applied to the USDA Reconnect program for rural broadband funding? Sorry, it doesn't really apply to Clayton, but to the other two.
We have not. To be honest with you, we have been so busy with everything going on. Being a small community, a small county, we don't have the manpower to do a lot of the things that we'd like to do. So we've really just been focused on design, construction, and then all the other things. Like we just hosted a graduation over the last 5 days, which has been getting national news. So there's been a lot going into just keeping things running as a school division. So we're starting to look into those things now, but we haven't yet.
Okay. And Kenny, actually, I'll keep it with you. Have you paired any of this? There was a question about whether or not how students are getting the signals from the trailers as well. Have you paired this at all with any programs that give students the equipment they may need to be able to access the broadband connection?
Yeah, so we are one-to-one device with a lot of our students. So they already have devices. Our high school students take them home. Our middle school and elementary students don't. But we're certainly in talks about looking at what that would look like to deploy all devices. I don't know that we're there yet on a final decision, but it's definitely something we're discussing as the situation unfolds and as we're all kind of figuring out what it's going to look like in the future.
Great. Clayton, for you, there's a lot of folks, and I know you touched on this a little bit, but there's a lot of folks asking about how you funded the rollout that you're doing. And I'm wondering if there are particular private sector partners or if there's other existing funding that you were tapping into to start this rollout. Is there any detail there that you can start to give us to give shape to how that network rollout has been made possible?
Well, thank you for the question. Where's the money?
Always.
So very quickly here, one of the things that we were able to do is pull together a cohort. One of the things you have to do, I think, moving forward, specifically for community-based internet connectivity, is to get the ecosystem I described earlier. Get the private sector to invest, get the electives to invest, get your stakeholders, yourself, et cetera. This becomes a community-owned infrastructure. So the less money you have to ask from others, the more control you have of your network. That being said, this stuff costs money. So what we were able to do is take a look at existing infrastructure, leverage that. So again, the fiber that we are utilizing has already been built out through a company called Intersection. Well, Intersection and Silicon Harlem are very close. And in our case, Intersection had more capacity coming into their kiosks than they needed. So we were able to use sort of the additional capacity to pull into, sort of the public housing units. So that's one way to mitigate your costs, is if you can get the partners in place that already have some of the infrastructure already paid for, and we can all bet on the come in terms of the expenses and revenue. Lastly, I would say that it is expensive, but again, most of the capital is up front. If you can keep it as wireless as possible, you are basically deploying a network at about a fraction of a percent of what normally it would cost. So one reality is the cost is coming down. And if you really want to know how to make money off of it, call me later.
So along those lines, since not every community has an intersection with fiber and excess capacity in their community, do you have any recommendations for how local officials can discover what network capacity resources may already exist that they can tap into?
Now, that's a great question, and it's a question for what I think is the absolute future. The absolute future will be an option to have what's called municipal broadband. And every city is going to ultimately create a municipal broadband network. It's not to say that we won't still have the incumbents out there. They are currently going to have to figure out how to lower their prices. But I believe that cities and the electives have to lead this. This is why you want to start, recommending policy in your area. They will have the resources to build out a municipal network as an option to every home. So I believe that that's going to happen. There's no silver bullet here, but one thing that I do believe will happen is every community, some will come sooner than others. We've already seen it happen in Chattanooga and other areas where municipal broadband will make it ubiquitous for everyone. Listen, the incumbents right now, and I don't know how many might be on this call, but the incumbents right now could basically give you broadband for free. There's no real cost to them for that. The reason why they can't is because they're on the hook for a video. Well, all of us on this call aren't worried about carrying ESPN. We can just lay out a network. That's why these, New York City Mesh and others can do this, because they're not on the hook of video. It's expensive to do video. I worked in the cable industry for a lot of years. I know what that's about. So municipal broadband networks, affordable wireless networks are going to dominate in the very near future.
Hey, Lee, I think you might want to jump in here and mention report on some of the municipally enabled broadband options that are out there. Again, not discounting the incumbents, but I'll let you reference that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great opportunity. We have just recently been working with some great partners at Alton Belandry and Company, some consultants in this space who've helped us prepare a really comprehensive scan of both privately provided hybrid networks, municipally provided networks, backhaul infrastructure, combinations of all of this. They ended up talking to 30 or 40 cities and did a scan of 19,900 cities options. That's how many there are. And so we feel like we have a really representative sample of ways in which cities have made this decision, looking at factors of upfront cost, long-term cost, operational expenses, capital expenses specifically, coverage areas where the private sector was interested and available, and where municipal decisions were implemented. So we'll be releasing that report shortly. We were going to probably try to put it out in April. We think now we're going to drop it soon. We are excited to put that out. And as cities go to make those decisions, they have a lot to consider. And we think that this tool that will come with it will help cities, communities, regions make those decisions in a smart way. So thanks for bringing it up.
I think that that actually kind of answers the question too that Nina Vetter had here, which is that for a community that's semi-rural, not defined as rural, but not urban enough to attract providers, what kind of more long-term solutions exist? And please do stay tuned. We will have some of those options, those business model options coming out in this report. I want to go back to Kenny. One of the things, I think it was you who mentioned that there's sort of a limit to the capacity in terms of the broadband that you are sharing, and possibly a limit to the number of users as well. Somebody asked, are the students in the area, for example, are they required to do things like meet with their teachers on Zoom or other platforms? And is that a problem, given that these sort of stopgap solutions that are being put in place can't necessarily support streaming video?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we did send home several rounds of packets, and I hate to say packets because it makes them sound like they're not substantial, but they're actually pretty good collection of work. So we've done 5 mailings, and I don't think they've all gone out yet. So every household is receiving work. But then we didn't want our teachers to just feel like they were limited to only doing those things. So we want to make sure everything we do is equitable so everyone has access, but there's still no reason that you couldn't provide external links to things or say, hey, you can watch this YouTube video. And I say that, they're not really made for, but I was in the parking lots, watching YouTube videos. I did not try a Zoom call on one. I probably should. But there certainly is that content that we can share with them through these sites. So it's really just that option. And again, it's looking towards the future. So we don't plan to just, pull these all back here in a month or two if we, end up back in school and things. We're going to keep them out as a connected area where our students can go and access. And we're seeing a lot of other users too. So we haven't just, it is filtered. We certainly did put our filter on there to make sure that they're going to secure sites and things, but we have not limited it just to our students. So I've gone to Food Line and seen several truck drivers pulled up next to the unit. In fact, almost daily when I go there, there's a big rig truck, which I told someone the other day, they're the backbone of what we're doing right now. If they weren't transporting supplies all across the country, we'd be in big trouble. So I don't mind if they use our internet for a few hours. So it's been neat to watch the people in the community, people who are teleworking, students who are going to college and are doing online classes. Everyone is using this, and I think it's been a big benefit.
It's fantastic. I think, Lee, did you have a question for either Kenny or Ryan?
Yeah, this question came in earlier from a partner city of ours in St. Pete. The example and use there are hotspots that city has created and is broadcasting hotspots to library parking lots, public buildings, infrastructure that has been able to aggregate folks in communities that aren't as car dependent, where low-income households lack car services. They're having trouble managing the sites as the city or the jurisdiction may have interpreted those rules around stay-at-home as a potential violation of stay-at-home orders because Wi-Fi is not an allowable activity like grocery shopping or exercise is. Have you heard of or have you run into any jurisdictions who have presented resistance across South Carolina or Louisa County that have presented resistance to having people congregate without cars or just congregate in general around these hotspots?
This is Ryan in South Carolina. We've been fortunate enough that our governor and his executive orders has put remote learning and food service as essential activities. It's actually been spelled out in every executive order. So we fortunately have not had that issue, and we've had to reinforce that at times. But No, we've not run into that, fortunately, and I think it was because the governor recognized that that could be a potential pitfall, and so they've included it from the outset.
Thank you.
Our large thing is gatherings of 10 or more. So we've chosen parking lots for all of our spots. So we would hope that people would stay in their vehicles. But if not, then the 10 or more restriction would help keep the crowds down. So we have not had any pushback on that either in Virginia.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it. We had a number of questions. They were all very, very good. We're sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but we'll try to pass on the ones that might be relevant. If you have contact information, we'll try to see if we can connect some of the speakers to you if they seem to be urgent questions. So thank you again to all of our panelists. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, hold on. Oh yeah, Arnold.
I'm doing that.
Oh, sorry. Thanks.
So I wanted to introduce to you our colleague, Arnold Lehigh, who has been tracking funding opportunities as it relates to COVID response and network coverage as well. So Arnold has a resource he maintains under the US Ignite website for funding opportunities. You can find more about that at us-ignite.org for lots of different funding opportunities. But Arnold, could you talk a little bit about funding opportunities for network coverages that you're seeing out there that you think are particularly promising?
Sure. Thank you very much, Scott. I actually like that the question came up earlier about whether any of the communities here had actually applied for some of the funds that are already out there. So as Scott mentioned, go to our site, US Ignite, under the tools section. You filter for the sector broadband. You'll see a list of tools, a list of funds from federal agencies that have existed that continue to be available for network infrastructure. For the sake of this conversation, I'm focusing on two particular funds that are available right now. Those of targeting COVID. So the first one is by the USDA, where they're focusing on distance learning and telemedicine grants. So this grant is, it's $25 million coming from the CARE Act, in addition to whatever is left over from a previous application window. So this grant is actually available a little earlier, but it closed, and the USDA recently reopened it to make sure that COVID response is actually captured in this. And part of the funds for this can be used for acquisition of capital assets, things like broadband transmission facilities, audio, video, interactive video equipment, terminal and data terminal equipment, computer hardware, network components, software, as well as instructional programming for capital assets. So this particular grant is focused on rural areas and seeking to expand the capacity for distance learning and telemedicine. The second one is by the FCC. So the FCC launched the COVID-19 telehealth program. Under this $200 million funding, and this program, $200 million worth of funds are going to be used to promote telehealth for low-income consumers. So looking to immediately support eligible healthcare providers who are addressing COVID-19, and will fully fund the telecommunication services, information services, and devices necessary to provide critical connected care services. And this is until that fund is depleted. Now, just as with any other grant program that I'm typically speaking about, I will always mention, be careful to look out for the eligibility of your community, as well as the criteria for the funding for the program that you want to use the funding for. And finally, the match requirements. So each of these programs will typically have a match requirement where you would need to put up a certain amount of money to qualify for the rest of the money. So as more grants become available, I'll keep making them available throughout the different forums that we have through this webinar, through other, to our website, and also through other, paths that we can find to put out there.
Thank you very much, Arnold. I really appreciate that. There is funding out there. It obviously takes work to track down, so I know it's difficult, but we will do our hardest at US Ignite to help connect you with these funding opportunities as they come up. That's something we do with our Smart Gigabit Communities program. If you're interested in becoming a Smart Gigabit community, please see us at us-ignite.org and click on the Smart Gigabit Communities link to learn a little bit more. It's a dedicated cohort of 30 and growing cities now, all dedicated to bringing out smart city technologies and building an infrastructure. And this sharing is a big part of that. We have the US Ignite Forum, as well as the platforms that are advanced wireless and several other programs that might be of interest to you. So please go ahead and look us up at us-ignite.org. I want to thank again all of our panelists for joining us today and sharing their experiences. We will have another topic that we'll be announcing here within the next week related to COVID. And we're currently asking for feedback from our Smart Gigabit communities for additional topics topics that they think would be useful, both in the short term for stopgap measures, but also looking forward to the summer for longer term. How do we rebuild the country and get things restarted? So thank you to the entire US Ignite team for joining us today. And again, to our panelists, it's been a great experience talking with you, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.